Welcome back. I know it's been a long time. We're back on the Salted Orange Podcast, Season 2. Um, we're calling it Season 2 because we are in new seasons of our lives. But
I was gonna say we're calling
my
it season two
name's
because we've been gone for a season. It feels like it's been a
so
long
my
time.
name's Luke, and I'm with my friend Matthew. That is our podcast together, the Salted Orange Podcast. If you want to know why it's called the Salted Orange Podcast, you can go back and watch every episode.
It's in episode one. Episode one's the best place to get that one. But yeah, we're back again. It's been quite some time because there's been a lot going on, which is really how we're gonna start this podcast episode is by talking about what's been changing in our lives and why we have taken such a long break between episodes. So I don't know if you want to go
Yeah.
first with that, but I'll let you
So
go
I,
if you
I
want
kind of
to.
hinted. I kind of hinted in some of our past podcasts that I wanted to be a youth pastor and that I had been looking at those opportunities. And so I got that opportunity, and I'm serving at a church as a youth pastor. Been doing it for about 2 months, 3 months. It's been pretty nice. Have got to learn a lot of things about my faith and some new experiences. How to deal with some people and how to interact with other people of your faith. So, and plus, I've been moving, but I think we both have been doing that, so that's not that big of a deal. Um, but yeah, it's fun.
And likewise, as you said, yeah, I've been moving too. I accepted a position as a as the pastor of a church, so I'm now uh,
Still not cool.
overseeing a church as the pastor of the church. Didn't expect to be here, but it's I guess where God put me, so I'm here. Not fighting against it. I mean, there's only. I always describe it as like how God opens and closes doors for you based on like
Hmm.
where you're trying to go, and like every single door on my path has just been shut in my face, and this is the one that was open, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't have any other doors to go through, so this is the one that I'm taking, and uh, I'm readjusting to the position of being a pastor of a church because it's much different than the roles I had previously in the last season of the podcast, where I wasn't really, I was just kind of working at a church, more in youth ministry and education than as a pastor. So there's a difference in the role of being a pastor than there is other staff people. Everyone has their own little niche of things that they do, and it's a different beast. So I'm relearning how to do all this stuff because, as I said, I was a pastor in the past. Kind of got out of it when I went to seminary, but now I'm getting back into it and just figuring it all out again.
I definitely think it's a new experience. Any kind of job that you're taking over, especially because being the pastor of a church or being working in the church, as we've talked about in past episodes, is it's a great experience, but also it can be very scary because you get to see, as I call it, the behind the scenes of a
Mm-hmm.
church. You get to see the angry, angry people, and then you get to see the people who are just true saints. And I've definitely seen both in my life, just with my dad working in a church. So you just got to learn to navigate those kinds of experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely it's a big transition for being outside of, particularly like moving. I moved states, I moved locations. Like I'm completely in a different place, so it's relearning what a different area of people are like, how they exist, how the human experience is in this location, where are they at theologically, where are they at philosophically, what are their political positionings, where are they uh, hanging out, what is the point of the church for them, what do they want to be doing. It's all a different beast because every church is different, A lot of them have similar things that they're trying to do, but it's different wherever you go. There's always something that this church is doing, your church is doing that another church is not doing. And trying to learn all those intricacies of the church is still part of what I'm going through, even though I've been here for a couple months now. And that's kind of why we took the break also, because we both started at relatively the same time. I think you started your position a little bit before I did.
A little early.
Yeah. So Luke had a little bit more time to get adjusted, but I needed some time as I was transitioning to to really be able to create the time to make the podcast happen, because the life of people who work in the church is it's a very busy one, and you can definitely get yourself trapped into just working.
You definitely
all
have to
day.
make time.
Yeah,
You have to make time to do things.
exactly. Yeah.
Because you can definitely you do church too much,
Yeah.
as I call it.
That was one of the pieces of advice I got when I started here. I had another pastor, and he's like, I know that the church is like right next door, basically, to you, so it's easy to get sucked into it and just be there all the time. And he's like, I've been there. I was at the church for like 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it just wasn't healthy. So you have to really set those boundaries and like, okay, I can be away. You have my phone number, you have my cell phone, you can reach me. It's not like I'm unavailable, but you have to set those boundaries and actually live a life. And he said, make sure you have a life that's outside of your church. And that's something I knew, but I think I share it with you guys who are out there, just so you understand, from the perspective of, I'm assuming, people who are not clergy, although there might be clergy watching our podcast too. So I don't know. If you're a clergy person, take those breaks. It's very important.
Comment down in the comment section. But I mean, I definitely did not. I saw myself being in youth ministry, but I didn't know if it was going to actually be a actual thing that happened. But I'm happy where I am. I don't know if it's going to be my career. Just like, I mean, you don't know if being a pastor is going to be the career of the rest of your life. I don't think when God calls you to ministry, that means you're going to be called to ministry for your whole life in paid ministry or in a job of ministry. I think when God calls us to ministry, it means that no matter where we are in our position in life, we will have a way to touch others with the ministry of God.
Yeah, you have different people who have different sets of skills. I just thought of, I'm a person with a very specific set of skills.
Over there.
Yeah, I was pulling out Liam Neeson. But we all have different skills, and it shows up in different ways for people. And clergy's not always. That was one of the things that I learned as youth, is like, clergy's not the path that you have to take if you are feeling called to ministry. It can be a lot of different things, and it's shown up that way for me.
I kind of wish they would talk about that more, honestly. Like, when we were younger, like, I felt like everybody was like shoving down your throat, you got to become a pastor to, really impact lives and things like that. Mm-hmm. And
I think part of that problem,
I just wish that would happen.
Specifically for us, because we grew up in a United Methodist church, and I think this is a common practice across denominations in the Christian church, is that you have such a lack of pastors, or you're seeing such a lack of young people with spirituality, specifically in your denomination. So there's no real yield of new pastors coming into the scene, or new clergy people coming into the scene. So you're really, you have a call to ministry and you're 19. Well, here's the path to go to seminary. You should get your degree. You should get an MDiv. You come back, take a church, take a couple churches, take all the churches, because we have too many.
Yep.
And that's what they want. So it's easy for a lot of people, especially like me. One of the things I dealt with seminary was, I walked in and I wasn't an MDiv student. And, as a United Methodist, coming into a United Methodist school, because I went to United Methodist Seminary, they're like, oh yeah, we very much need you to be a somebody who's going into the clergy of the United Methodist Church, because we don't have any. It's a global problem with the church. And I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Like, my field is more academic, and luckily I had a good advisor who's like, I know you're kind of in this period, in this position where you're not fully going for the MDiv, but you're not really going to be achieving much of something else that's going to be beneficial to you. So where do you want to go? And I'm like, well, I kind of want to be in academics. So like, here, go for this master's in religion that'll get you into a doctorate program. I haven't gone for my doctorate yet. At some point, I hope that's going to be a case. But
Well, and you've always
I'm
wanted
much
to be
more
in youth
competitive with it. Yeah,
ministry.
that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you've always wanted to be in youth ministry.
I was gonna say, it's kind of funny because in reality, the ideal job is I want is your job. So it's not like I don't want to be the pastor of a church. Well, right now I can say that right now. Like, I can do the pastor of a church, but it's
Oh yeah,
more
you
of
like
that
where you are.
I want to be in youth ministry because I feel like that's important and I'm passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit hard.
We've had friends recently that have said that they are so happy that we are passionate about young people and youth ministry, because like, I think that's just not heard of nowadays.
Yeah. Well, it's hard as like a pastor to be passionate about one particular area of the church, because you are called to do so many different positions in the church, and you're limited to what you can do because you have so many things to do. And I think that's a position that many people don't recognize. Is you're asked to do visitation, you're asked to preach, you're asked to be over youth, you're asked to work with adults, you're asked to work with elderly, you're called to hospital visits
From
and
0 to
funeral
100.
services and weddings and baptisms and service planning, and then you have to be a part of your parish and your community, and there's just a lot of different areas of the church that you're involved in, and you can focus on one, but you're going to leave some of these other areas out, and that's going to affect your congregation.
Well, as we talked about in past episodes, the young people are the future of the church, and like,
I hate that
I just
saying.
believe what, even though you hate that saying, yeah, but they are the future of the church. But like, they're like, if they want to keep it going, it's up to them. It's not the older people. They can die off with their church, and that's just the end of Christianity. I mean, that's the scary truth.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that they're the president of the church too. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
sure, in logistical and semantic understanding, youth are the future of the church, because typically the ones who are running the church are adults. But also, if you are not cultivating the youth to have spirituality, then you are not going to, like you said, the church is going to eventually die at some point. And it's not like, there was a quote that I read in the sermon the first Sunday I got here, and I was saying, you can't be using children as a means to get adults into church, because that's who you want. You have to be using children as children and cultivating their spirit. Like, your goal with children should be spirituality first. Like, once you get them to understand faith, to understand God, to understand their connection to religion, then you can start being like, hey, how do you want to be involved with this church? Let's get you involved with the church, so they become passionate about it, and then they want to stay. Because there's many cases, especially with like students going away for college, going away from home is a little bit more out there these days. People tend to be leaving for further and further away, because we have such access back home, like with social media and internet and things like Zoom, so we can call and still be a part of each other's lives from many, many miles apart. It's easy to go away. It's might be a little bit harder for people to stay now, because there is that opportunity away from where you grew up.
I just and the whole reason we started this podcast is because we saw our friends, as they got out of high school, not sticking with their faith, and so we've been wanting people of our age to listen to this and hopefully be inspired or, um, be happy that we are not afraid to share our faith online and talk about things that are hard. Because I try to say this with my youth all the time. I am only a few more years older than you, so I just went through what you're going through, so I can, give you my experience. And I don't want to be afraid to give you my experience because um, I just think that if you're fearful in your faith, then um, it must not be something that you want to share. I said this in a sermon because I got to preach a couple weeks ago. I said that your body should be so filled up with the love of God that it just bursts out of your chest, that you cannot not share the word of God and stuff like that. And so I've told my youth that that's what I want. I want them to go out of my youth program with that experience.
Yeah, one of the things that I've said many times about my own walk of faith is it's a miracle that I'm even still in the church, let alone in a clergy position or wanting to be a part of the church and not just showing up on a Sunday, which I'll be speaking about this week. So check out my sermon. I'm just shameless plug for my sermon. But
I
it's
share your
really,
sermon every Sunday.
yeah, it's a funny thing because there is the greatest potential for young generations to not be in church. I can't think of the last time I've heard of any of my friends sharing anything about their church with
Exactly.
me. Like, the only person I know that's going to church is you, and that's because you're
Hmm.
working at a church. But I mean, it's not the only reason that you're going to church, but
Yeah.
that's a reason that you're going to your particular church. It's because you work there,
Yeah.
and as
Exactly.
somebody who also works in the church, I get that. But it's really, really unlikely for our demographic, let alone the kids that are in our youth groups, to remain in church. Now, I got quite a few kids in this church, and I know you have quite a few kids in your program too. We have to reach them in a way that makes them want to stay connected, and that's hard, especially in this modern
Hmm.
era. It's really
And
hard
I
to get
think
them connected in church.
the scariest thing that you can ever say is that you're okay with them going to church somewhere else. And that's like something that people will be so scared about. I'm not scared of that at all because my whole goal is to keep you in church. Not necessarily in my church, but in church past your high school years. You should want to be in a church somewhere else or in our church. If I've inspired you enough that you want to stay in our church, that's great. There'll be a place for you. But if if you're, let's say you go to college, you know, halfway across the country, well, you're not going to be able to come to my church and be a good like member of our church, working in our church doing things because you're not going to be there. You're just going to be able to listen to it online. That's part of, we have online listening and stuff like that. And I listen to
Yep.
my home church, but I am not, I mean, I'm an active member of my home church, but I'm not active in like the actual physical sense because I'm not there. I'm not doing things constantly every week. So, um, I think we need to realize that, as people working in the church, we're gonna have seasons where we have certain people, and then we're gonna have seasons where those people aren't there anymore.
Right.
And what I equate that as is, um, there are still people out there we have to reach, and it may not be the people that you think. Um, a lot of people we had a bad experience in a couple, and I've heard of this happening in a couple churches where they've had like a split or anything like that. And I've heard people say, well, we need to get those people back.
Yeah, I've heard
Maybe
that all
God
too.
didn't want you to get those people back. Maybe you need to get other people, new people. because they're going on with their lives and going to wherever they're going to church, which is great. If they stayed in church, that's great. That's the whole point. But there are people that we are missing out on because we are so closed-minded to certain people.
Right. Yeah, I think for me, the word that you were missing in your dialogue was the community. You're part of the church
Hmm.
online, but you're not a part of the physical community. And I think
Exactly.
that's kind of how some of these people are functioning too, is they feel like just because they watch. I mean, it's good that you're. I'm glad that you watched the service. At least you're watching the service. Like, I'll take that over not going to any church. Period. But you
Exactly.
miss out on that element of what the church is about, which is community, and that is the importance of a physical location. And it's been touch and go since COVID. It's been touch and go to
Yeah.
try to get those people to, oh well, this is just easier for me. Yeah, it's easier, but as I said, the easy thing is easy for a reason, because it's not testing you, it's not making challenging you at all. It's just easy and it's right there. The hard thing that challenges you, or the harder thing, I don't know how hard it is to go to a church on a Sunday morning, but I guess that depends on who you are. But the harder thing
Oh,
is,
we haven't had kids yet, so apparently that's what I've heard is apparently that's harder. But I think it's just I think that's an excuse. But
yes. But as I said, like, it's hard when it's harder. That's when you're doing something that's causing you to grow.
hmm.
And like, I'm the biggest introvert in the room most times, and I don't want to be in a church a lot of the time. Like, I'm fine. I get enough satisfaction from just being by myself, practicing my spirituality. But there is a big facet of community that you miss when you are not in the church service, when you're not with other people, because you are not feeling the raw emotions of the room. You are not connecting through interpersonal and nonverbal communication with other people. Like, you don't get to share looks, you don't get to smile, you don't get to wave, you don't get to greet, hug, laugh, cry, pray with any of those people. You're just your own entity. And that, for me, that's a religion that is very boring. It's
Hmm.
very boring to do it by yourself. Very boring.
Well, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've got a lot of friends that have said, "Well, I just want to live," and we've talked about this on a podcast, I think. But I just want to live a good moral life. I don't want to have God. I don't want to have church. All of that, and so I think that has been my greatest struggle with all of my friends is understanding that there are people that are just they just don't want to be a part of a Christian faith. They want to be there. They want to live a good moral life, and it's hard combating that because I mean they want to live a good life, which that's what God tells us to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if we go based on Scripture, it says that we're supposed to be a part of a Christian faith and all that stuff. Even in the Old Testament, it talks about that, and then Jesus talks about it a lot in his teachings. So
Right.
I mean, it's hard to deal with all that.
I mean, I
But
obviously think there's a reason behind it.
yeah,
That's what I'm like. I want to know what that why are you trying to do that? Is it part of the inherent Christianity that's within you, or whatever religion? I should just say religiosity or spirituality that's within you, or is it just because you want to be a good person? Like, there's got to be a reason behind it.
well, I think the biggest thing, and I use my coin term that I use all the time, is wounded worshipers. I think that we are all wounded worshipers, and I think people don't understand that that's okay to have in a church. It is okay to be a wounded worshiper in church. I am a wounded worshiper. Matthew is a wounded worshiper. We have had experiences. Other people are terrible, but we have to learn to be around sinners, as I would say. Other people are terrible. We are terrible. We are sinners. We are allowed to. God gives us free will for a reason.
The funny part is, like, some
So
of the worst people are church people.
exactly. So
It's bad to say, but it's. I mean, sometimes it's true.
mhm.
We can be so caught up in our ways that we don't see the other person, and that's really the problem. And I think part of the reason for our generation, and I wrote about this in my thesis, which was on youth, um, adolescence, and the future of the church, is a lot of us don't come back because we aren't given access to the whole of the community. And we aren't taken seriously until I always told my previous pastor this, like, people don't take me seriously. Like, I might have a master's degree in religion, and I might have done all the trainings that you would want to be a pastor, but people don't take me seriously because I'm not, old and with kids and married and all that stuff. And he's like,
Exactly.
well, you don't have to rush to do all that stuff. It's like, no, it's not that I have to. It's not like those things are requirements for me to be a good pastor. It's that they're markers in like a societal mindset of, oh, this is someone who is experienced, and they want that experience. But even though I'm 25 with, trying to think, at least 5 years of pastoral work under my
Ministry,
belt,
yeah.
like, you're not gonna find that. Like, you're not gonna find that in a young person. So you've got to really get out of this mindset of pushing those children, those youth away from the church. We got to give them access. I think that's part of what we're missing, and part of your wounded worshiper is those youth have been hurt in some way by the church, and they see that they're not given access until they're older. So they're like, why am I going to be a part of this entity that's not going to give me the equal, love and support that I need?
Or they'll just say, well, I'll wait till I get older. Because if the church is saying, well, wait till you get older, wait till you get older. See, I've experienced, and you had talked about this on a podcast, a couple podcasts ago. You said that you ever like every time you were inspired, like spiritually, when you were younger, everybody just kept saying, wait till you get older, wait till you get older.
Right.
And I have heard that recently. I've heard people say that, you'll be more experienced when you get older and stuff like that. And I mean, I think that you do gain experience through age, but also, like, the whole reason you should throw somebody into ministry and let them experience it there is so that way that they aren't scared when they actually get to that point when you're going to let them do ministry.
It's kind of like I reminded of this thing that I see on various social media sites over and over again. It's one of those guys who talks to himself and just changes characters, those little TikTok reels kind of thing. And he's going to apply for a job. It's an entry-level job. He says, yeah, you can, this is an entry-level job. You can enter after you have 5 years of experience. I'm like,
Exactly,
it's entry-level. Like, how are we supposed to get that experience without being given the opportunity? And the best way we can do it is by having somebody walk with us while we're doing it. Give us somebody. If you're so worried about the youth messing up your church, and trust me, they're not going to, but if you're so worried about the youth messing up your church, walk with them, do something with them, not just push them away and say, this is our problem, you'll have it in 20 years. Well, guess what? In 20 years, the church is going to be dead. There's not going to be anybody going there because they left because you didn't give them a chance to be themselves in the church. There's no place for their identity and their formation to grow when you shut them down constantly in their youth. Like, you have to give them the space to be and to exist as they are. That feels like a good podcast episode to me.
So, I wanted to kind of move to where we were going to talk today by asking you a question. Recently, I heard someone say that we don't do that kind of music here. We don't do that. We don't do praise music at our church. And that was it was so funny when I heard someone say that. They said, we don't do praise music here at this church. And I was like, then what do you do music for? I was like, come on. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that you have to recognize that some of these old songs. I'll be honest. Like I love traditional hymns. They're one of my
Hmm.
part of my favorite ways, and I connect to it. I grew up that way. It's nostalgia to me, but nostalgia is a combination of happiness and trauma. So it's it is good, but it also is like part of my childhood. And I think for us in this generation, those old songs are just slow. They're sad. Like we had a really really cool piece that was in a minor key the other week, and I'm like, this is amazing. As somebody who studied some music, not a, not vastly, but I've
I'm the
studied
music
some
major
music.
over here.
Yeah, I'm like, this minor song is amazing, and I love it, but it's so dreary and slow, and it just doesn't hit people. It doesn't hit different, you know, to use the
Hmm.
common lingo. You have to adjust, I think, and it's not that you have to get rid of them all. There's some really good hymns. There's some really bad hymns too,
Yep.
and some that theologically are not the best. But that's why we have to be intentional about what we're doing. Like,
Hmm.
or if we're
Exactly.
just choosing traditional hymns, we're just choosing basic stuff that has been in the book since the 1700s. You're you're preaching your song ministry to an audience that has been dead for 300 years.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
you got to get more into the time period
It's
and try to
all
get some other
nostalgia.
people. Yeah.
I think. I mean, I like hymns, but I think that a lot of the reason we like hymns is because of nostalgia. I think you know. I mean, you can. I've definitely had people in my church that have in my churches that I've been in. Uh, One of them was like they wanted to just sing "I'll Fly Away" every Sunday. And I was like, well, you can sing that every Sunday, but you're only singing it because your grandma 40 years back sang it. You're
Mm-hmm.
not singing it because you truly believe what is in it. You're just doing it because you liked that your grandma sang this song 40 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. And that
Yeah.
might sound country of me or hickish of me, but I strongly believe that that's uh, some of people's backgrounds in that um, in music and how we approach it. Um, but today I wanted to we were talking about how we wanted to do our start back or our season 2 of the podcast,
I'd like to
and
say one thing about that topic before you jump into this next one,
okay,
if you'd let
say
me.
so. Hey, go
I
ahead.
I kind of want to run a little social experiment. So here's my challenge to you this week. I always like doing
Coming in
this.
the
I love doing this in sermons so much because one of the things I think about when I do sermons is, okay, it's nice that I said a good word for, 20, 30 minutes on a Sunday morning, but who's going to remember it unless I give you something to do with it? So I got to give you homework. And I'm curious if you want to run a social experiment, those of you who are listening, go ask people what their favorite hymn is and why it's their favorite hymn. And I guarantee you that over 90% of them, I don't have any records on this, but I'm just taking this is my hypothesis, if you will. That 90% of them will have a connection to some sort of ancestor in their life. Usually it's a song that was played at one of their grandparents' or parents' funerals. Like I'll
Yep.
Fly Away is a really popular song because it's played at a lot of funerals. So go do that. And then tell me in the comments about it. I would be interested to see what your numbers show me. Now you can go on to your next topic.
Okay, so we've been kind of hinting at it, but um, I I have heard this from many people that church cannot be showy. A church
Hmm.
service cannot be showy. We can't just can't have the flashing lights. We can't have the fog machines. But um, there's a saying that you put all the music before the offering in church because your offering will be better.
Yeah.
Um, it's sad, but that I mean, it really is kind of true. I mean,
Yeah.
because
Definitely.
some people give because of how good a sermon is or how good the music was.
I was gonna say don't put it after the sermon because you're not getting any money, but especially on the ones that are like you need to do this and that and this and that. Like if it's a feel good one, you can put it after, but if it's not, don't. Just don't.
Yeah, if they're shouting at you to give, you're not going to get much money. But I think that there is some room to be showy in church. I think it's always been that way. I mean, that's why we, in the traditional church, we've always been showy on our big holidays and our big festivals and things like that. Because as human beings, we need a little bit of entertainment. Would you agree with me?
Definitely in today's age. I remember doing a sermon and I quoted it that we have. I don't remember the percent, the number, but it's like 6.7%. Like that's our attention span. It's like 6.7 seconds or something like that, and like a goldfish is longer. Like we have such a short retention span now, and it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse because technology is one of the facets that causes our attention to be so bad.
We're gonna put a Subway Surfer video right beside our podcast. You know.
Yeah, we're gonna have an interactive game that is on the YouTube link, so make sure you go check out the YouTube that you can play while we're doing it. That's kind of what you have to do sometimes now, and I agree. I agree to an extent. So I will never say, and I can't say I will never say because that would be a lie. I typically end up in the gray area on most topics, so I don't fully go to one side or the other because I can see the benefit of both. And yes, I'm one of those people who doesn't like showy churches. Like these mega churches are things that I'm like, I don't know if they're doing real religion sometimes, but I've been to some of those ceremonies and like they feel more like concerts sometimes than worship services to me. And I know that's not how I worship, but there's other people who worship that way, and I think it has to be a bit showy. I do agree. It has to be a bit showy because how are you going to get their attention? How do you get people to pay attention to like I watch without a doubt most Sundays somebody falling asleep during my sermon.
Oh yeah.
Like you see that so easily, and that's on me as an orator. Like I need to be able to make my sermons more engaging, and I try to do that with my inflection. Yeah, it's mostly older people, but I try to make my inflection to the point that you're going to be drawn into what I'm saying. Because there's going to be times that I'm going to be talking really loud in your face that I want you to hear what I'm saying. It's going to be other times I'm really quiet and I need you to really focus on what I'm saying. So it's just a skill that we have to learn I think as preachers. But I mean, to go into the fuller aspect of showy, like I went to a full on, I don't even know what to call it. I guess they're non-denominational, which is
mega church basically.
It kind of felt like a mega church. It wasn't quite that big, but one of the big reasons why it did not feel like a church service to me because it was in an auditorium. It was like there was a stage, there was seats that were not comfortable. There was a bunch of lights going on, spotlights everywhere. It was overwhelming, and I feel like for me and for most of the older generation that would say showy churches are not actually practicing. It just felt like a show, and I was overstimulated. There is a balance.
Okay, old man.
There has to be a balance between being to the point that you're stimulated. You can't be over or under. You have to be stimulated and paying attention. And part of that is, how the service is run, and part of that's how you show up.
I agree. See, I don't know. I don't believe that a church needs to be in a church building. By like church building, I'm saying like the old, traditional sanctuary, all that junk. The reason a sanctuary is a sanctuary is because we call it that. I mean, like I'm saying, like the room that we worship in, if we call it a sanctuary, then it's a sanctuary. It could be a giant aircraft hangar, and we call that the sanctuary. You know what I'm saying? So, like, for me, I think that whichever way you want to worship is fine. Um, I definitely think that I watched a video. I'll probably send it to you after the podcast sometime, but I can't remember who the guy is. But it's this guy. He's a pastor. I don't necessarily agree with all the stuff that he talks about, but he talks about making sure that your songs and your worship are actually worship. Are you worshiping a God, or are you just there because of nostalgia, or because you like the song, or because
you're
you
getting
like
a
the song?
paycheck.
Yeah, or because you're getting a paycheck. Ah.
I'll be honest. There's
But
Sundays I'm there just to get a paycheck. I'll be honest. Like I gotta be honest. They are Sundays that I am there just to pick up that paycheck and be like, "Yep,
hopefully
I
your
did my
church
job for
isn't
the week."
watching the podcast.
Oh, I know there are probably people watching, but again, that goes back to how I approach it. I think that's what you're kind of getting at too. Is it's how you approach it. If we think it's a sanctuary, it's a sanctuary, and I didn't walk into that auditorium thinking it was a sanctuary. I walked into that auditorium thinking I was going to watch a show, and show I watch. But there is an importance in having those bright, flashy lights to get people involved with what you're doing. And I actually preached a sermon on this, and one of my favorite things I said about it is we should be really hyping up the church. We should be like having these glitzy signs like they had in Hollywood back in the day with the names of your stars on the instead of the stars, it would be your pastor, like welcome to Sunday worship starring Luke.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, that might get more people to
mean,
come into the church. And my pastor looked at me and said, that would get less people to come into the church because I would be on the billboard. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes it'd be like that.
I think it is so true, though. I mean, like I said towards the end of the beginning of the podcast, I said we should be so excited about our church that we want to talk about it. I said this in my sermon a couple weeks ago, and it was like everybody was like, "Whoa!" I said, "Are you so excited about your church that you are willing to share something about your church? Are things going on at your church so exciting that you want to share them with other people?" I mean, I'm happy that I see some of the people that go to some of these super contemporary churches sharing their stuff that's going on, like Bible study and other things like that, because they're doing it. And just to get back on the showiness of church, or the contemporary. We talked a couple podcasts ago about contemporary versus traditional, and I think we had my dad on the podcast.
We did.
And I have recently had a revelation. I feel like and you can comment on this and say yes or no, but I think our generation, yeah,
I'm here to comment.
I think our generation is not as into the ritualistic part of Christianity.
That'll preach, as they say. That'll preach. They're not. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely not. They don't care. They just
and you can even go into even the super ritualistic things about Christianity, like communion. They don't want to have all the ritualistic parts of it. I mean, they want the most broken down parts of it as like, hey, we're out eating. There's my communion right there. We're just having bread and juice. We don't need to have all these big showy scriptures before it, or big poems. I don't know what they'd be called. Liturgy. We don't need to have these big liturgies in front of things. And I'm not saying that as myself. I'm not saying that's something I want to get rid of. But I think that's what our generation wants to get rid of, is these big liturgies, because they're getting nothing out of it. It's just a big thing that we're saying, and they're waiting for their bread. I said that one time. There was like a kid I was with, and he was like, "Well, when are we gonna start?" I was like, "Well, wait till he's done doing his talking, and then we'll go get our bread."
You proposed a juxtaposition in your dialogue there, which is they don't want the show, but they want the show. It's we have to. It goes back to my intentionality. I always go back to intentionality and community. So if you hear me say anything about religion, those are the two things you should go away with. But we have to be intentional with what we're doing, and that's part of the reason. When I do communion liturgy, it's one of the things I've been doing lately. I actually added another. We're doing it more frequently now. Wesley would be proud of me. But we're doing it more frequently now, and I'm doing it differently
Sunday.
every time because it's not about the show. I'm making it not about the show. I'm saying the liturgy like I need to say. Like I'm saying the important parts. I haven't bare bonesed it yet. That's coming. I hope nobody from my church is watching. It's gonna be like, this isn't communion. I'm waiting for that. This is not communion. But you have to do it a different way. I think it's not the bread and the body of Christ. It's still the bread and body of Christ. You know,
you don't. Just because the liturgy wasn't said doesn't mean that communion has lost any meaning.
Yeah,
in my book,
we have a split sometimes with the kids. They go down to do Sunday school and Sunday worship themselves, and I was blessing the elements for them. And you know, I just when I think about it, I'm like, I'm not doing the full liturgy when I bless their elements. I just go, make this the body and blood of Christ, you know, redeemed by his blood, so we may be for the world the body of Christ, redeemed by his blood. There's traditional Methodist liturgy. Have fun. But that's all you gotta say.
That's all you
have
need
to say one sentence and it's done. You don't have to go, here's the whole story of Jesus. You know, he was born in Nazareth. He came and he was, you know, chased down by this evil king guy.
Yeah.
You don't have to do all that. It takes forever. Nobody wants that.
And I think that's the showiness that I was talking with some of our members of our church the other day, and I said that that's what's driving people away is they're, you know, we had this big exodus of the traditional church to build all their contemporary churches and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the big movement that we've had. And I think that one of those big movements is to get rid of the ritualistic part of church. I mean, it's a very fine line to say that is the reason, but I don't think that is the huge reason, obviously. And I think when I say ritualistic, I'm saying the formula of church. I think we have such a formula in church that if we break it, it's like, you know, a sin to break, you know, to not do the offering before the sermon, or not to not sing this song, the doxology, at the end of the offering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've gotten like so built into like this formula of what church has to be that we are so afraid to get away from it. But I think others have already broken away from that, and that's why we're seeing those churches grow. Is because they are not afraid to break away from that formula.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a time coming where I'm gonna, you know, when you start out as a pastor, they typically tell you don't change things really early.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went and said, you know, when we look at the presidency of the United States, and I'm not getting political by any means, and I mean that, their first 100 days are often what people look at to determine their presidency.
Exactly.
You can tell what a president's going to do in 100 days. You can tell what a pastor's going to do in 100 days. You know, if I did nothing for the first 4 months that I'm there, they're gonna be like, he's doing nothing. Let's get rid of him or find somebody new that will do something. Or we have to do it ourselves. That's what you're showing us. But when you step in, and like I stepped in week 1, I was changing things. I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here and do it the same way because I'm intentionally thinking about how I'm changing things. I'm doing it slowly because you have to trust me first. I
Exactly.
can't just come in and change everything because then it becomes my church and not the church that I'm pastoring. It becomes my church, and that church, nobody wants to go to that church. Believe me, I don't even want to go to that church, and it's my church. like, like the Church of Matthew is not a church you want to go to, but the church of the people. I almost went by the people for the people. I didn't get a history class for a second. But the church of the people is where we want to go. That's where we want to be. And it has to be the people. I'm actively taking measures to, and I think everybody should in their churches, to think about what is important to you. Why do you come to church? What do you need to be fulfilled? Because I can guarantee you there's people that come to my church who are not fulfilled every Sunday. And I'm sorry. I'm working on it. We're all working on it. It's going to take some time. But the thing is, I can't go so far to one extreme and then I've left out the other extreme. I got to find the balance.
Exactly.
And I have to really get through to the people who are in the church. And you have to do this with your church. It's like, there's things that we do that are not things we have to do. We can step out a little bit, create some space, try some different things. Like, if you're stuck doing hymns, here's some contemporary worship songs. Here's an extra contemporary service that we're going to have that's going to be more geared to you. Now, I'm not saying that every solution works for everybody, but you have to get down to the nitty gritty of those things and get rid of, and maybe try to take out some of those elements. Have you tried doing prayer instead of joys, concerns, or prayers to the people? Have you tried having a time of quiet prayer with the person next to you? That's an option. Have you tried doing a call to worship or an opening prayer that's a testimony from somebody in the church?
Exactly.
There's other
It
ways
doesn't
to do
have
it
to
too.
be so traditional.
Right.
By traditional, I'm not talking traditional songs. By traditional, I'm saying, you hear people say, well, that's the way it's been for 40 years. Well, how's it working for you?
You said
Is
my
it-
two least favorite phrases in this podcast. That's the way we've always done it. And the youth are the future of the church. Like those.
I'm gonna make a T-shirt for you, both those, one on each side.
Can it be like burned? Like have an image of like a burn happening on the shirt, so that'd be great.
Maybe,
I don't remember
but
what you said, but I got worked up.
those two phrases just got you.
Yep.
But so my dad would tell you that um, there is some showiness to the church. That there has to be. I mean, so I would probably just wrap this in a bow and say it's okay to have your Christmas cantatas. It's okay to have your big Easter celebrations. You know, we represent our worship to God by how well we do our worship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, when I'm saying that, I'm not saying how well you do this one formula of worship. It's how well you put yourself into worship. How you show how much you believe.
Yeah. And I will say there is going to be a little bit of showiness too, because the other part of that is how do you make the worship service so other people can engage with it?
Exactly.
Like, how are you making it engaging? And there's, as I said, there's Sundays I'm going just to pick up a paycheck, but on those days I still have to be on. Like I can't walk in and say, okay, well, I didn't have my coffee this morning and I really don't want to be here. I'd rather just go back to sleep, but I'm here because we have worship at this time. Let's open our hymnals. Like that's boring. I'm still gonna put my energy into it, even if I come home and
that's your
crash
showiness right there. That's your showiness. You're putting your whole self into worship. Even if it isn't your worship, you're putting your whole self into worship.
And that's all God asks for is give God your whole self. Let God do the rest.
But I like what we've talked about today. Because you know, my experience, I guess, in church has been always this constant battle between traditional and contemporary. Because I've always grown up traditional, had a little bit of contemporary, cherry on top, uh, and I grew up in a mixed worship service where we were mixing both types of music, and so it's hard for me to understand the only traditional or only contemporary crowd. Um, and we can say we don't want to be we don't want our worship to just be showy or to be a show, but we have our Christmas cantatas, we have our Easter, celebrations. Those are showy. No matter how much we say they're not, they are. I mean, you put your Sunday best on when you go to uh, Christmas, don't you? You make sure that you look the best when you go to Christmas. Make sure you look the best when you go to Easter. I mean, I used to have friends growing up that their parents would take pictures of them when they went to Easter, when they went to Christmas. Most of the time it's because they were creasters, but um, like we are showy when we want to be, and we're hypocritical on what when you could be showy and when you can't be showy. I mean, so I like having this conversation of, oh, it's almost like a pulling the curtain down, or ripping the wallpaper off. Like, we have to admit that sometimes in church we are showy, and I think it's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's part of it is recognizing that, and it's a quote that comes from, the quote I said earlier was a Mercer quote, and I think this is also from Mercer. It's, if you are distracted by what's going on in the service, you aren't fully worshiping. Like, you have to find why you're coming to worship and what you're getting out of it. Like, it's a different approach when you come to worship just to come to worship. It's like, okay, I come every week. It's what I have to do, to be a good Christian. It's not what you have to do to be a good Christian, by the way. It's not. It's
That's
definitely
a whole
not it.
podcast episode right there.
That's not what you... Don't come to church. No, don't catch me saying don't come to church. Cut that out.
You're the editor.
I am the editor, so I won't cut it out because it should stay
You
in.
won't cut it out.
It's part of the entertainment. It's part of the showiness that needs to happen with this podcast in order to make it entertaining.
The showiness.
Right. You have to be able to connect to it. And you also have to realize that not every element of worship service is crafted specifically for you. Mm-hmm. It's not for just you. It's for the church. It's for everyone. There's going to be different things that you connect to. And when you approach the church worship service as, okay, God, what do you want me to get out of this? It is different from just showing up.
Yep. I think we just have so many people that say, you had a sermon the other day that said, this was a long time ago, but you said just show up.
I did.
And I think that you have inspired that in other people, that it's just showing up to church. It's not it's making it whatever you want it to be. I mean, you could come to church and just say, "Oh, I'm doing it because I have to." Well, that's okay. But you're not gonna get it. You're not getting something out of it that you are missing out on. You're missing out on something if that's the only reason.
Mm-hmm. And that's a process too. Showing up is the first step.
Yep.
You have to, you can start doing stuff. I've had many conversations about this lately. It's like, you can do stuff when you show up. When you're not there, you have no say or what goes on, but you gotta show up. That's the first thing. From there, you want to be a part of the choir? Go for it. You want to serve communion? Go for it. You want to start an outreach program? Go for it. You want to run a food pantry? Go for it. You want to organize a community swim date? Be my guest. Just don't pick a day that's so swelteringly hot that I will not get out of the pool. But you have to show up first, and then I think the next step is after that is not just showing up, but you have to be accepted.
Mhm.
Like showing up is one thing, but being accepted and welcomed, that's another. And oh, I would love to just be one of those. I wish I had the spirit within me to be completely honest with church people when it comes to welcoming others, because there's
Mhm.
churches who do it really really bad, and there's
Yeah.
people that we put up front that are the not the right people that have the the
Oh,
RBFs.
we definitely put people in spots in ministry that should not be in there.
Yeah.
But
And-
I mean, that's our opinions, and maybe in other people's opinions, they're the best. But
mm.
I you know, people might say we're not the best people to be having a podcast, but we
Well, we're
started it
not.
because yeah, but we started it because we both felt passionate about it, and we both want to share our faith with others. And this post-COVID era that we are in, you got to find new ways to inspire others spiritually. And so, I hope that listening to these podcasts has helped other people. I've definitely heard some people. This is more in person, but if people want to comment below, it's down there.
Especially if you're on
You
YouTube.
just scroll it down real quick, and it's right there. You can say how how our podcast has inspired you, because that definitely helps us a ton. I know Matthew would say the same. If you
Definitely.
say that it has inspired you, it makes us want to record. The whole reason we want to record is if people say, "Oh, wow, that was so good," even if you're lying to us and you say,
Okay, don't do
I,
that. I can
but
tell most of the time.
yeah,
It's like,
but
okay, yeah.
I mean, sometimes we need that little bit of you know people being nice to us, and maybe saying a white lie.
I would encourage you
But
not to say a white lie, but as your pastor, I would encourage you not to say a white lie. I would encourage you to be truthful, but you should be truthful in a way that's honest and not in a way that's malicious.
yeah,
There's many people who are just like, I'm going to tell you you're terrible just because I want to be mean. No, you should be like, hey,
we'll
I
probably laugh
think
at those comments.
I do laugh at those comments. They're my favorite ones to get because it's like, you didn't listen at all. Go back and watch it again. But yeah, if you're, it's the way you do it. It definitely is the way you do it, and it's a little bit tougher with text, but we'll get there. We'll figure it out.
But I think that's a good place for us to wrap up today. If you have any ideas in the comments, tell us what you want to hear, because we are terrible sometimes at figuring out what we're going to record about.
Yep. Today's episode is one of them spur of the moment ones that Luke's like, hey,
They
can we
always
talk
turn
about
out
this? And
good,
I'm
though.
like, all right, whatever. We
Half the
probably could have just
time,
probably could have just done the
my
podcast on
ideas
what
are
we've
like
done,
that. Yeah.
and they're
Half the
like,
time, they're like that. I mean, half the time it's something that I've experienced in my life during this week, because, like, being in ministry, you see
oh yeah,
things every day that
oh
it's
yeah.
like, I wish I could open my mouth and say a novel about.
Mm-hmm. The
But
confidentiality as your pastor. Them darn NDAs.
but
Uh,
comment down below.
mm,
I'm gonna say that 400 times because we want comments and we want
yes.
likes. Even if you just hit that like button, we're gonna sound like
Honestly,
every
say
other
if you
YouTuber.
if you hated this, dislike it. I don't care. It
Yeah,
helps us in the algorithm, so I'll take it.
yeah. If we got
It's a
4,000
reaction.
dislikes, we
So
would get it.
comment,
But
dislike, and like all have the same power on YouTube, so it doesn't matter what you do. It's one of the reasons why
we're gonna
negative stuff
try.
spreads fast.
We're gonna try to get on a recording schedule. We don't have
Mm.
that yet, but we're gonna try to do that.
Try to get back to what we were doing every other week, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
but
look for that.
life happens.
I'll say the best way to make sure you make sure that happens is if you can follow the channels on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube or follow our TikTok, not our TikTok, our Twitter.
We don't have a TikTok.
That one, the Twitter one.
You have a TikTok.
Yeah, I don't. I don't talk about that one.
Not a very good TikTok. No, I'm just kidding.
You like them videos.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you follow us, that's going to be the best way to know when something's out because it'll be posted. So just stay tuned for that.
Any final thoughts, Matthew?
There was one thing, and there's a quote that came to my mind that you said, we might not be the best people to be having a podcast, but I don't remember who said it. I know it was in a video I watched somewhere. It's like, you have a voice for a reason, and if you keep silent, nobody knows what you have to say. And we are definitely people who, maybe not the most qualified, maybe not the most experienced, but for people who are listening for our age group and what we're targeting, we're the right people to do it, I think. Because we have something to tell you. We have a message to talk about. We have experiences to talk about. We can relate to you in ways that other people cannot. So I feel like what we're doing is important, and I hope it's important to you too.
That's just makes us feel good that we get to talk to each other. But
that's fair.
We've had a good little episode here. I feel like.
I honestly think it could be 2 really good episodes. We could have fleshed out either topic more.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but if you want to hear both of those, like if you want to hear what's going on in our lives, or if you want to hear about the showiness of the church, comment down below and we'll talk about it some more.
Talk about it again.
Yeah, and we may have some. We had some guests on the podcast before, and so we're gonna try to do that at some point again. But if any of you guys have, technically you're a guest on the podcast if you comment, because then we'll talk about it. That's so boom, boom, boom.
Next week because we're gonna go back and talk about topic. I'm kidding. This is all a joke. We're gonna go talk about communion baptism again. Because we're gonna go back. That would be funny if we just did every episode. What's changed? Because that's the other good thing. It's like we do it again because things have changed. It's
exactly
what I say today may not be the thing that stands tomorrow. I don't know. It could change.
The church is always changing.
It's fluid.
Yeah. But we're gonna sign off for now. But we're gonna be back in a few weeks.
A couple weeks, hopefully.
Yeah, and hopefully not a couple, but a few.
A couple's 2.
I don't know what a few means.
Few's 3.
Okay. Well,
so you want a couple?
We'll be in a couple weeks, but stay tuned. Watch our Twitter, and we'll see you later.